She said I was lucky to be tolerated, like she was doing me a favor by staying. So I didn't argue. I just let her keep the apartment. She didn't ask why, and she definitely didn't check the lease. We moved in together after 2 years of dating, mostly because it was practical. That word stuck with me. Everything with her was practical. When we talked, how we touched, even how we argued. She was cold, precise, and strangely condescending. Like she'd already decided I was beneath her, but hadn't yet figured out the most graceful exit. Still, I stayed. I think I was trying to prove I could be enough. When she finally snapped and said I should feel grateful she tolerated me, I didn't fight back. But something shifted. Not in anger, in clarity. That's when I decided to let her feel what it's like to be tolerated. It was a Tuesday night. The kind of evening that shouldn't mean anything. We'd both come home late, tossed leftovers on plates, and collapsed into our routine silence. That was our comfort zone, a quiet filled with unsaid things and mutual disengagement. She was scrolling through her phone when I asked if she wanted to watch something. No sarcasm, no edge, just a question. Her reply came like a shrug of a sentence. "You're lucky I even tolerate you." She didn't say it to hurt me. That would have made it easier. There was no venom, just a tone of passive, indifferent superiority. Like I should have already known. Like I was on thin ice I hadn't earned the right to step on. I nodded. I think I even smiled. A non-reaction that cost me more than any fight would have. Inside, though, something cracked, not like glass shattering, but like a hairline fracture that had been forming for years finally reaching the surface. I had spent months, maybe years, trying not to upset the balance. Making myself smaller, more useful, more agreeable, less too much. I had interpreted her bluntness as honesty, her detachment as independence, her jabs as wit. But in that moment, I realized she didn't see me as a partner. She saw me as something to manage, a tolerated inconvenience. And when you're the one being tolerated, you start asking yourself questions no one should have to ask. Am I annoying? Am I dragging her down? Is my affection embarrassing? That night, I went to bed next to her, but it felt like sleeping beside a verdict. She exhaled like I was the burden she couldn't shake, and I inhaled like someone about to make a very quiet, very long-term decision. The next morning, it was like nothing had happened. She made her protein shake, opened the windows, and asked me if I'd remembered to call the plumber. Her voice was light, routine, like the sentence from last night had just slipped out, a typo in the conversation. She didn't apologize. Of course she didn't. That would have required acknowledging it was cruel, and cruelty wasn't in her vocabulary. She prided herself on being blunt, efficient, not the emotional type. Her favorite phrase, when I ever hinted at discomfort, was, "Don't be so sensitive." Later that week, we had friends over for dinner. She made lasagna, the one she always said I liked too much for someone who didn't help prep. We sat at the table, wine flowing, laughter bouncing around the room. At some point, she launched into a story about how some people just need constant validation, and glanced at me when she said it. It wasn't overt, not enough for anyone to notice. But I noticed. I always noticed. The joke landed. Her friends laughed, not maliciously, just easily. She was funny, after all, charming in that effortless way that made her seem in control. And I played along, smiled, sipped, nodded. But inside, that knot returned. The one in my stomach. The quiet tightening that said, "You're not imagining this." She was reframing the narrative, slowly and socially. I wasn't just lucky to be tolerated. I was needy, dramatic, a little too much. I didn't feel hurt as much as I felt erased. Like my perspective had no witness. And that's the trick with people like her. They don't explode. They chip. One joke, one sigh, one dismissive shrug at a time. Until you start doubting your memory, your reactions, your sanity. That night, she kissed me on the cheek before bed and said, "You good?" I said yes, because I was done explaining feelings to someone who treated them like a performance flaw. But I wasn't good. I was starting to wake up. She never did that. Not out of malice. She just wasn't the small gesture type. Her version of kindness was transactional. Helping with a chore, forwarding an article, tagging me in something vaguely relevant. Intimacy was rationed, like a controlled substance. And now, here she was, placing a mug on my desk with the practiced smile of someone reenacting a scene from a relationship she'd seen online. "I know I can be blunt," she said, "but I do care." I nodded, took the coffee, even managed a thanks. But something about the whole moment felt scripted, like she'd sensed some shift in the air and decided to preemptively manage it. It wasn't an apology. It was PR, damage control, a flick of affection to smooth over the emotional static. I didn't push back. That was the old me, the one who believed moments like these were signs of growth. But now, I saw it for what it was, a reset button, a way to keep the story going without ever rewriting the plot. Later that night, she brought up a possible vacation, just the two of us. Some remote cabin she'd bookmarked. No pressure, she said, which of course meant there was pressure. The whole thing reeked of diplomacy. I was being managed. It worked for years, but not anymore. I wasn't angry. That surprised me. I thought I'd be. But all I felt was distance, a widening gap she didn't even seem to notice. She thought we were reconnecting. I was rehearsing silence. That's how detachment works. It doesn't come with a bang. It comes with a slow rearranging of your interior. I wasn't trying to win her back. I wasn't trying to win at all. I was just done playing the role of someone lucky to be tolerated. And for the first time in months, I didn't need her to understand that. It happened casually, almost too casually. We were both in the kitchen. She was talking about hosting a little wine night with some coworkers. She leaned against the counter, swirling her coffee, and said, "Might be nice to have people over more now that I have the place to myself." She didn't even glance at me when she said it. Just sipped. That's when it hit me. We hadn't broken up. Not officially. Not even vaguely. There was no conversation, no argument, no closure. Just a silent presumption. One she had clearly decided on her own. She was staying. I was leaving. And she was so confident in that script. She spoke about it like it was already reality. I didn't react. I just finished drying a plate, nodded slowly, and walked out to the balcony. That was the moment. The one where I knew she'd already rewritten the story in her head. She was the independent woman reclaiming her space. I was the clingy man-child who needed to learn boundaries. It was probably already drafted as a tweet. What she didn't realize, what she hadn't bothered to check, was that the lease was still in my name. Every line, every bill, every renewal, mine. She never wanted to be listed. Just in case, she said, back when we signed. And I didn't argue. I never did. Until now. That throwaway comment about having the place to herself, that was the first real crack. Not in her, but in the illusion I'd been maintaining. That we were still in something mutual. That her coldness was temporary. That I could do more, be more, love better, and maybe that would unlock something human in her. But no, she had moved on emotionally, logistically, maybe even romantically, without ever saying it out loud. Because to say it out loud would make it real. And making it real meant accountability. This was easier. Let the silence do the work. Let the assumption carry her forward. Let me step out quietly, without a fuss. What she didn't count on, what she never even considered, was that I had stopped playing along. I didn't tell her that night. I didn't tell her the next one either. Because sometimes silence isn't weakness. Sometimes it's stage lighting. After that comment, my mind wouldn't let it go. I kept flashing back to the day we signed the lease. She had been so calm about it, so uninterested in the details. We stood in the leasing office, and when the manager asked if both of us would be on the agreement, she gave a quick, almost rehearsed smile. No need. Let's just keep it simple, in his name. Back then, I chalked it up to convenience. She had always hated paperwork. Said she liked flexibility. Her word. I had taken it at face value, like I did with most things she said. That was my pattern. Translate detachment into maturity. Read emotional distance as strength. Tell myself it was fine, that she was just wired differently. But now, I replayed that moment with new clarity. It wasn't about convenience. It was about control. She wanted to float above the fine print. Untouched, unbound, unaccountable. She didn't want responsibility. Just presence. Just access. And I gave it to her. Willingly. I remembered other moments too. Subtle ones. The way she never introduced me as her boyfriend. Just used my name. The way she kept her friends' circle separate. Her schedule unshared. Her bedroom nightstand perfectly untouched even after months together. She built herself a version of independence that always had someone else paying for it. And I had been that someone. I didn't feel angry. That was the strange part. No shouting inside me. No imagined confrontations. Just a deep, steady recognition that the story I had been telling myself, about us, about me, about love, was broken. She was never reckless. She was calculated. Not cruel, Not manipulative in some cartoon villain way. Just always 2 steps removed. Always quietly arranging the board. And now, the board had shifted. She thought she'd won by default. But I was still holding the piece she forgot. The one with my name, my signature, my leverage. I didn't want revenge. I wasn't plotting anything. But I was done being the background character in her curated narrative. If she wanted the apartment, she could have it. But she was about to learn what it actually meant to live in something you don't own. It was a Wednesday when she finally said it. We were folding laundry, or rather, I was folding, and she was scrolling through her phone. She paused, looked up, and said, "Maybe we should take some space. Just to recalibrate." She didn't look nervous. She looked rehearsed, like she had practiced that exact sentence in her head, probably more than once. There was no emotion in her voice. No hesitation. Just clinical detachment dressed up as consideration. I nodded. Slowly. Not because I agreed, but because I didn't care enough to disagree. Then she added, "It's probably best if you leave your key with me. We'll figure out logistics later." That was it. No talk of how we got here. No mention of working through anything. Just the presumption, again, that I would be the one leaving. And I played it perfectly. I didn't argue. I didn't remind her whose name was on the lease. I didn't even raise an eyebrow. I just said sure, like someone who had finally accepted their role in someone else's movie and was quietly walking off set. She took my silence as compliance. As always, she mistook stillness for surrender. But that night, I pulled up the lease on my laptop, checked every clause, every deadline, every renewal term. I was still the sole tenant. Every bill, every utilities account, every deposit, in my name. She'd spent so long assuming control, she never bothered to check whose ship she was steering. She went to bed early that night. Slept soundly, I think. Meanwhile, I stared at the ceiling and planned. Not revenge. Not drama. Just an ending. One she wouldn't see coming. Not because it was cruel, but because it was clean. A week later, she hosted a wine night. It wasn't unusual. She loved performing hospitality, not in a warm, generous way, but in the curated style of someone who treated her apartment like a social media set. Candles lit. Cheese board meticulously arranged. Lighting dimmed just enough to flatter everyone's skin. I was still living there, technically. Still sleeping on the same side of the bed. Still cooking half the meals. But that night, I was a ghost. She introduced the space like it was hers. My place, my kitchen, my little safe zone. Guests clinked glasses and complimented her on the vibe. She smiled with the polish of someone stepping into her solo era. No one asked where I stood in all of it. I didn't offer. I sat on the arm of the couch, sipping water, nodding along. When someone joked about how independent she was, "You've got it all under control, huh?" She laughed. "Yeah, it's nice to finally have space that's mine." They all nodded. Toasted. I didn't flinch. The truth sat in my pocket. The lease, the utilities, the email to the landlord I hadn't sent yet. The paperwork of reality, waiting for its cue. It was strange watching her craft a narrative right in front of me. One where I had already exited, and she had gracefully transitioned. No breakup announcement. No timeline. Just soft editing. She didn't look at me once during her little speech about new chapters. I don't think she could. Not because she felt guilty, but because in her mind, I had already left. And maybe emotionally, I had. But physically, she was throwing a party in a space she didn't legally own, drinking wine in a kitchen she hadn't paid for, telling stories about freedom on a stage I was still footing the bill for. And I let her. Because sometimes it's better to let people walk confidently into their illusion. The fall is quieter that way. It was a Thursday morning when it landed. A letter in the mailbox, plain envelope, local return address. She brought it inside with the rest of the junk mail, tossed it on the table, and went back to her phone. I picked it up and read it. Rent increase. Modest, but formal. Effective in 30 days. She noticed my expression. "Is it bad?" she asked, eyes still fixed on her screen. "Not really," I said. "Standard bump." She shrugged. "So what do we do?" That's when it happened. She said we, but meant me. Always had. I handed her the letter. She scanned it. Slowly. Then again. Her brow furrowed. "Wait, do I have to sign something?" she asked, suddenly uncertain. I just looked at her. Calm. Neutral. "You said you needed the place. I left it to you." It was quiet for a beat too long. She asked, "Is the lease in both our names?" That's when the room changed. The air got tight. "No," I said. with the same tone she once used to explain why she didn't want a dog. Factual, final, unbothered. Something in her froze. It was the first time she realized she wasn't in control. That the whole structure she'd built, the independence, the space, the hosting, the story, rested on paperwork she never read. A signature she never gave. A lease she never owned. She stood there, holding that letter like it had insulted her personally. Her mind was doing the math, the timeline, the optics, and I didn't gloat. I didn't smirk or offer her an out. I just poured myself coffee and went back to my laptop. For once, she didn't speak. She just sat down, quietly, and stared at the letter. That's the thing about people who assume power. They rarely notice when it's gone, until it smacks them in the face wearing their own name. I wasn't the tolerated one anymore. She was the tenant without a claim. I gave it another 5 days. Not out of kindness. Not even out of hesitation. I just wanted to see if she'd say anything. A question. A plan. A hint of ownership. Nothing came. She avoided the subject like it might bite. Stayed late at work. Cooked less. Cleaned more. It was her version of tension. Compulsive, sterile, oddly polite. So I did what she never thought I would. I notified the landlord. 30-day termination. No drama. No request for negotiation. Just a clean, quiet end. The letter was emailed. The response was prompt. I printed a copy and left it on the kitchen table. That evening, she came home, keys jingling, bag slung over one shoulder, already half scrolling through her notifications, and stopped mid-step. Her eyes landed on the paper, then on me, then back again. I didn't say a word. She picked it up and read it. Twice. Then came the panic, dressed up as confusion. I thought we agreed, she started. But we hadn't agreed. She had assumed. Built a whole script off the premise that I'd fade out, that I'd be too passive, too conflict-averse, too grateful just to be tolerated. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't explain. I just said, "You have 26 days left." She stared at me like I'd hit her. But I hadn't moved. The next hour was silence. Her walking from room to room like the apartment had turned against her. It hadn't. It had never been hers to begin with. She tried a softer approach the next day. Asked if we could talk. Said things were confusing. That maybe we'd rushed this. I didn't argue. I just repeated the same thing. You said you needed the place. I left it to you. She stopped pushing after that. Because what was she going to say? The lease said everything. And for once, I wasn't trying to win. I was just done pretending I didn't have the right to leave. She moved out 2 weeks early. Didn't say goodbye. Didn't slam the door. Just vanished. A couple of boxes disappeared one day. Then the rest a few days later. I came home to an empty closet, her key on the counter, and a single post on her Instagram. A mirror selfie captioned, "New beginnings." Some things you just outgrow. She never mentioned me. Not directly. But I knew the subtext. A few mutual friends reached out, cautiously. Heard bits of her version. That I blindsided her. That I weaponized the lease. That I'd been cold. It was fascinating, in a way, how quickly the narrative adjusted when she wasn't the one holding the mic. Some believed her. Most didn't care. Life moves on faster than pride does. I didn't explain myself. Not to friends. Not to her. Not even in my own head. That part of me, the one that used to narrate everything for her approval, was gone. There was no revenge. No spite. Just an absence. And that's what she couldn't stand. People like her don't fear rage. They fear irrelevance. They don't know what to do when the person they look down on simply walks away. And me? I stayed in the apartment for another month. Not because I needed the space, but because I wanted to remember what it felt like to exist somewhere that didn't require permission. Somewhere I no longer had to prove I was worth staying for. The silence wasn't empty. It was honest. And in that quiet, I realized something. She never actually saw me. She saw the shape of someone convenient. So I stopped being convenient. And just like that, her story collapsed. If someone only values you when you're leaving, were they ever really with you?